Hey everybody, welcome back. So for today's project, I'm going to be showing you how to replace a water pump on your Jeep Liberty with a 3.7 V6. This will pretty much apply to any Jeep Liberty, the first gen, whether it's a 2002 all the way up through 2007. The only difference that you may run into is the type of the fan that's attached to the water pump. My particular Liberty has an electric fan on it. It's not a hydrostatic fan or a hydraulic fan. So if you have one of the earlier Jeep Liberties or you have the one with a diesel, this process may be a little bit different, but essentially it's the same. So what's going on is the Jeep has developed a water leak from the pump. It's actually leaking out the nose out of it, and if you look, if we go down here, there's the harmonic balancer, and if you can tell, it's all wet right down there. So what it is, it's leaking out through the bearing. It's not leaking through the gasket. And what's going on is, if you look, you can tell it's all wet down there. So the coolant is leaking through the bearing of the nose of the water pump, which is essentially right there, and it's dripping onto the harmonic balancer and getting splashed all around, and it's eventually causing a leak. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove the water pump, and I'm going to show you the steps. So why don't we go ahead and do that now. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove the serpentine belt. And the way this is accomplished, this is the idler right here. I'm sorry, this is the tensioner. And the way this comes off is there's a 15mm bolt that's on the tensioner. All you can do is take your longest breaker bar and put a 15mm socket on the bolt, and you're going to go clockwise, and that's going to take all the tension off the belt, and then you can take it off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. Alright, so the next step is, what you want to do is you want to take the idler off, and the idler removal is necessary because it's blocking a couple of the bolts that are holding on the water pump. So this is also 50mm, so again, using the same setup you use for the tensioner, you're just going to take that bolt off, and then the idler will come right off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, so we went ahead and removed the idler, so now you can have access to those two bolts for the water pump. And the next step is, before you take the water pump off, you want to remove the coolant from the system. The first thing you want to do is open up the expansion tank, take the cap off of it to let air into the system, and then we're going to go below and open up the valve, the petcock for the radiator, and drain the coolant. So let's get underneath the Jeep. Alright guys, so we're underneath the Jeep. Just to let you know where we are on the driver's side in the front of the radiator, and here is the petcock for draining the coolant. So what it is, it's a 16mm nut that's on the petcock, and what you're going to do is you're going to turn it and counterclockwise, open up, and then the coolant's going to drain. So why don't we go ahead and do that now. Alright, so the coolant's draining, so make sure you have a big enough container for it. It's probably going to be about 3 gallons that come out of your coolant system. Alright guys, so the next step is actually removing the bolts on the actual water pump. And what you're going to want to do is use your breaker bar just to break those. They are 13mm. Make sure you use a 6mm socket when you break those so you don't strip them. And what you want to do is, as you're taking them off, what you're going to want to do is you're going to mark the bolts, because not all the bolts are the same length. So what I would recommend is, starting here, use this. There's 8 bolts on the water pump. Use this as number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And as you're taking them off, just use a Sharpie and just label the head as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So when you go ahead and put them back in, you know which bolts go in the right position. So why don't we go ahead and do that now, and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so once you remove those 8 bolts, go ahead and give the water pump a little tap on, and it will come right out. Before you remove the water pump, you're going to want to move your catch pan to directly underneath the pump, so any of the coolant that is behind the pump falls in the can and not on the floor. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get the new water pump and start the reinstallation of it. Alright, so here's a new water pump. So if you look at the gasket surface, there's actually 2 indentations. There's one right here, and there's one right here. And when you get the water pump, obviously you're going to get a new gasket. Make sure you go ahead and use it. But the indentations are there to kind of guide you along the path to make sure you put the gasket in the right place. So we're going to put the gasket on, and then we're going to walk back over to the Jeep, and we're going to make sure the surface on the block is nice and clean, and we're going to use some Scotch-Brite. So why don't we go ahead and clean the block and get that prepped. Alright, so before you mount the water pump, what you want to do is you want to take some Scotch-Brite and clean up the block and the sealing surface where the gasket is going to mate up to it. So you want to make sure it's going to be nice and clean, so when you mount the water pump that you have no leaks. And once you hit it with Scotch-Brite, just spray it down with some brake cleaner or some carb cleaner to remove any oil or residue off of it. So just to go that extra step, so again, ensure it's nice and clean. So why don't we go ahead and do that, and then we'll go ahead and mount up the pump. Alright, so now we're mounting up the pump. Everything's been cleaned and it's been ready to go. So in case you didn't mark your bolts correctly, or if you forgot, so essentially what there's 3 longer bolts that are they need to go back in a specific place. And counting from the left, it's bolt number 3, 4, and 6. So it's basically this one, and number 6. So those are your 3 long ones. All the other ones are the same. So what we're going to do is we're just going to run this up using an air ratchet just to lightly seat them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to torque them down to 40 foot-pounds. So we're going to lightly seat them, and then we'll go ahead and torque them. Alright guys, so everything's lightly seated. So what you want to do now is you want to break out your torque wrench and start torquing these down. The spec on it is 40 foot-pounds. So what you want to do is grab a 3/8 drive torque wrench, set it to 25 foot-pounds just to get everything even, because you may have tightened stuff a little bit more when you're using your air ratchet or you're doing your hand ratchet. So just go to 25 foot-pounds first, going through a crisscross pattern, and then once you do that, set it to 40 foot-pounds, and then just set it to the final torque. A little bit of word of advice with a torque wrench. If something doesn't feel right, don't keep going until it clicks. Just use some common sense when using a torque wrench, because sometimes the torque wrench may not be set, or there's the threads could be dirty, or there could be something going on where it's not giving you the click saying that it's done, and then what will happen is you're going a little bit too heavy on it, and before you know it, you strip it out. So take your time on this if you've never used a torque wrench, and just go at it kind of methodically and take your time and make sure you don't strip anything out. So why don't we go ahead and torque them down, and we'll go to the next step. Alright guys, so everything's torqued down to the final spec of 40 foot-pounds. Once you do your crisscross pattern, just start from bolt number 1 and go all the way through number 8, and just double check it and make sure you didn't miss anything. So now that the water pump is all torqued down, now it's just a matter of putting the idler and the belt back on. So why don't we go ahead and do that now, and then we'll talk about putting coolant back into the system. Alright guys, so the idler is back on and the belt is back on. Typically with most vehicles, the belt routing pattern is usually listed on the frame head, and there's usually a sticker kind of telling you which way it goes. But in the event that that sticker is gone, the easiest way to figure out which way the belt goes on is just looking at the pulleys, and if it's smooth, that's like on the water pump, that's essentially going to be the back side of the belt. And if it's a groove pulley, that's going to be on the inside of the belt. So just by looking at it, you can usually figure out which way it goes and put the belt on pretty quickly. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to close the petcock on the radiator and seal that off, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the coolant back into the system. Alright, so now that you have your belt back on and the petcock is closed on the radiator drain, what you want to do is go ahead and use the correct coolant and fill up the expansion tank that's on the firewall. Go ahead and fill it up and fill it all the way to the top, and you'll hear a lot of the air make its way through the system as you're filling it, so just take it nice and slow. And then what you want to do is you want to start it. So there's two ways of bleeding the air out of the Jeep. I've already flushed this coolant system once, but anyway, there is a factory bleeder on the upper radiator hose right here that you're supposed to use to bleed the air out of the system. Whoever had this Jeep prior to me put this thing in here with red Loctite, and I cannot get the thing out. I've tried with a breaker bar and it won't come out. But anyway, I've never, even with that being stuck, I've still managed to just let all the air bleed out through the expansion tank, because luckily the expansion tank on the Liberty is high enough where a lot of the air is just going to migrate its way out on its own. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start it. And initially what's going to happen is the level on the expansion tank is going to fall. What we're going to do is we're going to top it off, and then we'll keep an eye on the engine temperature to make sure it's coming up to temp. And while it's first running, what you're going to want to do is, because more likely there's going to be an air pocket in the heater core somewhere in the engine, what you're going to want to do is give a little bit of gas so it kind of breaks that air pocket, and then it'll kind of clear it out on its own. So why don't we go ahead and do that, and we'll go through the bleeding process. Alright guys, so I just, we topped it off. I just took it out for a test drive, and the temperature gauge is right in the middle, right where it needs to be. So one thing, when you are bleeding the system, what you want to do is come in to the HVAC controls, turn your heat all the way up, and just turn the fan on. It doesn't matter what position the blower is on, but just make sure the heater core is on, so any air that's in the core, it's gonna come out of the system. So once this thing has been running, what you want to do is honestly just turn it off and then just let it sit, let it cool down, then check the coolant level on the low coolant level on the expansion tank, and whatever it is, just top it off, and essentially that's it, you're done. So that's pretty much covers the process of changing the water pump in your Jeep Liberty. As you saw, it's not that complicated, it's pretty easy to do. I highly recommend doing it yourself. All it takes is a couple hand tools, and really not that much. So so again, I hope this helps everybody out. If there's any questions, thoughts, concerns, feedback, anything like that, go ahead and put them in the comments box, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And again, as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day. Bye.